I really enjoy sharing building and remodeling stories, whether they are good or bad. Learning what others have gone through can help us avoid making the same mistakes, or using a good idea can make our project even better. My guest today has some interesting experiences with projects that he's taken on since buying his house. Mike Knox is a stand-up comedian, the author of 2 books. He's also worked as a prison guard. From flooding to roof issues, Mike has some great advice for anyone thinking of buying a house. I'm George Siegal, and this is Homeowners Be Aware, the podcast that teaches you everything you need to know about being a homeowner. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I want to jump right into your challenges and problems as a homeowner. I always talk about mine, and the list is really long. Tell me about some of the stuff you've had to deal with in your days as a homeowner.
Sure. I always like to tell people you don't have to own a home just because I've had such horrible experiences with mine. And mine started with I bought my home about 2008 when everything crashed. And so I got house fever. I thought I have to own a home. I'm going to all these places. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's like, you got to get into real estate. And I was listening to that. And I really just tell people to just slow down, make sure that when you buy a home, you've got some money saved, because the second that you step into that home when it's yours, there's all these things that everybody else wants, like the second I moved into my place, it's like, we need new floors. Well, that was another 15 grand. And then I really trusted the realtor, and I really trusted the inspector. And I always tell people, you've got to meet everybody halfway, and you've got to check all those things, because I'm still finding stuff that the inspector from 15 years ago missed. And I'm still dealing with those issues where I thought that guy knew what he was doing. When they really come in for a couple hours, they go up in the attic, they're checking around the house, but I'm still finding, places in the attic. I'm dealing right now with leaking that's coming from the side of the house because it's been raining so much in Los Angeles. We really don't get a lot of rain in Los Angeles. And so this year was a lot of heavy rain. So I'm noticing, like, I should probably get some rain gutters that I never had before. All those things are just always adding up. About a month ago, I was on my way to go see some friends that I hadn't seen in a long time, and the water heater burst. It had flooded the garage, and now those are and I was thinking, oh well, I guess it's been 10 years since I had the water heater. But when you're renting, that's all the stuff the landlord or the property owner has to deal with. When you're the homeowner, that's all the stuff you're dealing with, and nobody ever tells you any of that. And that's the things that constantly, it's like the upkeep of the house. I always think of like in my mind, my house is small, it's 1,200 square feet, but I'm always thinking it's like this English mansion castle that I've got to maintain, but it's just me maintaining it. But there's always something that comes up. And that's what it's so hard to kind of convey to other people that are looking to get a home, is like, it just, to me, is always every day that I'm waiting for something else to happen.
Yeah, that's a very common story. What part of LA do you live in?
North part of Los Angeles in Valencia, so near Magic
Okay.
Mountain.
Yeah, I mean, so the challenges that everybody has, okay, the home inspectors, I've had a bunch of them on as guests on the podcast, and a lot of them seem like great guys. I've met a few of them in person, and they really know their stuff, but they do admit they're only with you 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4, depending on the size of the house. You had a smaller house, so it probably was less. So they're not going to catch everything, but you like to think some of the stuff you're finding that they would have caught. As far as realtors, that's another tough one. I hear good and bad stories. It's like, how much are they obligated to tell you? They really want to sell a house. They want their commission. So it's a tough relationship to know how much you can really count on other people. And what I always say is you have to be your own best advocate for yourself.
Yes, and I think a lot of people go into, like I did. I went in blindly thinking all these people are professionals and they're all going to help me, and I don't really need to do any research. But that was finding out years later, like, I should have done better research. But you never know. It is a total gamble. I definitely am glad that I own a home, but you never really know who you're dealing with. Inspector wise, for me, the guy had known the real estate agent, so he kept hugging her, and he was more interested in, like, catching up on old times. So that was a big reason why he missed a lot of stuff, was because he was just chatting it up. And I learned, like, make sure these people don't know each other and they're friendly, because that works better. You really want that person that is in your best interest. That's not there to just have. He was just there to have. Oh my gosh, I've seen somebody. He was just there to have fun.
Did she recommend him?
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's always a problem for me
Yes.
because there's a real conflict of interest there, even if they're honest. Yeah, I think it's better to go into a transaction with one in your pocket that you found,
Yes.
um, just to avoid that kind of stuff. Because I don't really want a chatty Cathy, trying to make out with my realtor. I want them to, I want them busting their butt finding out what's wrong with my house.
Yeah. Same with the broker. She knew the broker, and that guy turned out to. I mean, he turned out to same thing. He was more interested in like going to coffee or lunch with her than, and I finally just went with another broker because he finally, after all these months, just was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this anymore. And that was what killed me, is you're just dealing with people like, how were you ever licensed to do this? And it was so hard to get people just to do their job.
Now, in Los Angeles, the real estate disclosure forms are pretty comprehensive. So, did they disclose everything? Was there stuff that they lied about?
It's not necessarily that they lied about it. It was just the big thing for me was the AC air ducts were all rotted. So it's very hot in Los Angeles, especially I'm low desert. So I have to run the air conditioning all the time. And within the first week of me moving in, I had to replace the air conditioner because we had fires going on. We had this huge heat wave, and the air conditioning went out. And that's why I've never forgotten that. Like I would hear people say that, oh, something's going to happen the second that you move into your house. And sure enough, my air conditioning completely went out. Well, that was at the time, it was another 4,000. Now air conditioning, replacing that stuff's probably around 15,000.
If you
And
can
that's
get
why,
the parts at all, because they're ordering them from China.
yeah. And a lot of times I wish I didn't have the money at the time when I moved in 16 years ago. And I really wish there was stuff that I had done, because now everything coming out of COVID is 3 times more expensive. Like I'm looking at getting a new roof. Well, that's 3 times more than it was when I had bids 3 years ago.
Yeah, be careful with roofers, man. Uh, that's a whole other scam business. There's some really good ones, but I had a leak at our house, and a roofer came and he stood outside. He looked up at the roof, it's a 2-story house, and he goes, "Yeah, it'll cost you about $2,500 to fix your problem." And I said, $2,500 to fix what problem? You're down here. The roof's up there. Don't you need to go up there? He goes, "No, I've been doing this for years." That wasn't even the part of the roof where the problem was. And this guy was going to rip me off for $2,500 fixing something that wasn't even broken.
Yeah, and a lot of them they know that you don't, like for me, they'll come in and they know that I don't know anything. And so I'm putting a huge amount of trust into somebody, into this stranger that, and thank goodness for Google or YouTube, because I can at least YouTube stuff that saves me a
Mhm.
ton of money. Which a lot of people don't do, and a lot of people are just putting so much trust in these people that they're because they're trying to keep their job or make money for their business. And again, it just all comes down to money and how much more money I can make.
Now, how much were you aware? I guess I think I know the answer of the building code is it up to earthquake code? All the things that are safety features of the house. Were you concerned about any of that?
No, because I had house fever. So moving in, I wanted to get into a house. I had to get into a house. I could have cared less if it was, I was living in a closet. I didn't care. So looking back, those are all the things that, because I'm in, right in the middle of when earthquakes happen, the epicenter of earthquakes, and earthquake insurance, I can't afford. It's way too expensive, but that'll devastate your house if a huge earthquake hit.
Yeah.
Uh, and those are things that nobody is telling you about. Nobody's telling you about your insurance that you got to carry, your property tax. They're not telling you that if you're not paying your property tax, they're going to repossess your house. So there's all these other things that you're just not aware of. Building code specifically, every time something breaks, the guy comes in and is like, "Oh, it's not up to building code. That's another $300." And so these building codes are always changing. Laws are always changing, supposedly always changing, which is another thing people need to be aware of, because they'll come in and rattle off some law where they have to charge you more money to install something.
Now, you probably don't have flood insurance either, I would imagine.
No.
It'll comfort you to know. I just read this article that said 25% of Los Angeles is susceptible to flash flooding,
Oh yeah.
and flood insurance isn't terribly expensive out there. But if your house was to flood, and we learned this in making the films that I make, your insurance isn't paying you if your house floods. There's so many things. Have you ever actually read your insurance policy to know what you have that is covered?
I have, but that's only because I have a family of insurance agents, so that's been instilled in my head. But most people don't, because it's so exhausting and boring to look through that stuff. But a lot of insurance It reminds me of a warranty that I got for my car where I read through it and it covered everything but the engine. Well, what do I want this policy for then? So
Yeah.
yes, definitely got to read everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of exclusions in there. And like here in Florida, they took out a lot of policies don't cover sinkholes anymore. What's one of the main damages people get from their house is sinkholes.
Yeah.
Hurricane coverage, the deductible is 2%. So people don't realize the first 2% is out of their pocket. And in our state, you can't even sue and get attorney's fees if you win anymore. Can you get attorney's fees in California?
I'm not too sure, but I've tried to sue, and it is, especially LA County is by far the worst place to try to get somebody into court or sue somebody. So I've definitely been through that.
Wow. So with the lessons that you've learned, have you thought about just going back to being a renter? I would rent if I could.
I would too. It's just that I'm too far into it now, and I really feel like, what I give up now. I really just am at the point where I just give up. I mean, it just seems like when everything's thrown at me now, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Which is frustrating because they make homeownership out to be the American dream. It's your biggest asset. It's your center, a place for pride. And the reality is, it's a money pit that you're responsible for, and sometimes it's not fun.
No, not at all. And that's another reason why, the little quick answers that people always give you is, well, why don't you just move out of state? And my thing is, at least I know my neighborhood, my street. To me, it's a safety net. I can go home and feel safe. I don't want to go move someplace where I figure out that I have a wacko neighbor or there's all these other problems. At least I've pinpointed most of the problems in my house, and I'm like, I'm just not going to move. But um, all of those problems do bother me, but I don't want to have a new set of problems, and that's a large reason why I don't want. I mean, moving is such a hassle. Also,
Yeah.
that's
Wasn't
so
there a
many.
Tom Hanks movie called The Money Pit?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think that's very true. I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very true. Now, does a lot of this stuff that's happened to your house make it into your comedy act? What's the act pretty much about?
My comedy act mostly is about my daughter's epilepsy, because that's a whole nother story. We're just trying to get epilepsy laws in place. It's such an underfunded medical condition. And then also I worked in a prison, so about prison stuff. But I would definitely, you know, definitely add this stuff. But it's just hard for when you're talking to people that don't own a home. They think that I'll tell people don't own a home, and they think that I'm crazy. And so that's just one of those life things where you've got to learn on your own okay, I can't stop you. Especially now, it blows my mind that the interest rate is between 7 and 8%. I don't know how people afford to get a house now, but again, I didn't know how I afforded it when I tried. So
Well, there's a lot of people that own homes that are underinsured. So if you don't have a mortgage, I mean, you have to, if you have a mortgage, insurance is mandatory. But a lot of
yes,
cash buyers are just saying, well, we're not going to have insurance. And then a wildfire blows through or a flash flood or something happens, and it could be life altering. It also says a lot that you get more comedy out of epilepsy than you do out of your home. The home's really not funny. What are the things you talk about? Because epilepsy, I know it's very challenging for anybody to deal with. What's that been like having a daughter with that?
as a parent, it's just been horrible. But the great part is my daughter got a BNS implant about 8 years ago, which is a vagus nerve stimulator pacemaker for your brain. So she's been seizure free for 7 years. She still
Oh
has
wow.
some difficulty stuff, but she went from, a diagnosis of never being able to progress past the age of 6. She's 17 now. She's getting straight A's. She loves school and learning. And as somebody doing comedy, it was hard for me because 8 years ago, she was like a vegetable, basically couldn't joke around with me, communicate with my wife and I. So it's just horrible to watch as a parent where your child isn't progressing and being able to keep up. And now she's able to do all that. She's just a happy little kid. And so that definitely warms my heart to see that she's just able to be a kid because she was in and out of the hospital so much. She stayed back in the fifth grade because she's just in the hospital so much. So the fact that she's not having seizures and she wasn't able to sleep, she'd have a lot of insomnia. So it's not just the seizures; it's also interrupting your entire life. And you're just pretty much not even able to function. Couldn't leave the house because she's going to have a seizure, and I've got to go rush her to the hospital or administer some medication. So it disrupts everything in your family.
Wow, there's nothing worse than when there's problems with your kids. So when you're making jokes about it on stage to an audience, what's the reaction? Are people first a little wow, I can't believe he's talking about it, or is it in a way that they go, oh yeah, this is rough, but he's coping with it and has a sense of humor.
Yeah, it's all about, it's not making fun of epilepsy. It's trying to educate people about epilepsy because I didn't know anything about epilepsy. And so comedy is a great way to tell people about their vulnerabilities. And I meet so many people after shows that are like, I have epilepsy and I'm so scared to talk about it, or I have kids, they don't want to come out of they're getting bullied at school because of this. And I'm so glad that you brought it up and talked about it. And that's what I've learned from all of it is it's about educating people because they just don't know. And then also trying to get laws in place because California has no laws, so nobody has to recognize it. So I take my daughter to school, and she'd have a seizure at school. They didn't have to recognize at all or be trained to how to administer medication or anything like that because there's no laws to protect anybody with the disability of epilepsy.
I
So there's
imagine
a
a lot of
lot.
the. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a lot to be done in that area.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of comedy about maybe all the things that the state does recognize that are far less important
Yeah,
than
yeah.
something like that. What was it like being a prison guard? Which prison were you at?
It's horrible. I was at the Lancaster, which is the only prison in LA County. It's just it just dumbs you down. And I was at the time I was doing it. I just needed a job and I needed insurance. And I was like, I'm gonna start a family, so I can't work in a prison. I'm going to get out of there. And I was told that you have to work in there to be a parole agent. And I was doing an internship in college, which is a complete lie. That was another bad information that I got. Um, and then I was like, well, I'll write a book about it. And, I am interested in prison because not a lot of people knew about it at the time. And so I did that. I wrote a book about it and I did what I accomplished to do. But you have more problems with the people that you work with than you do the actual inmates because you're just trying to do your job and they don't want to do their job. And so you end up arguing with them. And a lot of it is like I always say the Kruger-Dunning effect. It's overly confident, dumb people because you've been given this badge and this uniform. And that's a large problem with anything with law enforcement the idea is it's this one direction of communication. So if you're trying to communicate with somebody else that thinks they know everything, you're just at a loss.
Now, how accurate are films or shows like Oz, Shawshank Redemption, Alcatraz? When you see those, is there any reality to what we see in those films?
Oh yeah. And those movies are it's so hard to make a movie. So the writers and producers, everybody, they're consulting people that have actually worked in a prison. So they do a pretty good job to the point where it's hard for me to watch because it is so much reality. But prison is really about, 99% boredom and 1% of, pure terror because it's just a city, it's functioning and your function as working there is just to house and feed. And so you really don't have time to deal with everybody. They should be dealing with people's, mental health. It should be a different aspect instead of just locking them up and forgetting about them. And so I had a lot of compassion. There's a lot of them that are criminals, but there's a lot of dysfunction where they're throwing everybody together. And the idea of this violence where everything has to be dealt with anger and violence was just unnecessary.
Do you ever see was there a lot of stuff smuggled into prisons like you see in these shows where things are coming in, things are going out?
Yeah, and the problem with that is that the idea of everybody wants to believe, well, it's the prison guard that's doing it, but you have visiting that's going on 5, sometimes 7 days a week, and those people aren't patted down or searched. So stuff just flows in constantly, or it comes in through the back gate, which is where food is coming in or resources are coming in. And those are people that don't work for the prison. And then you also have inside the prison, you have teachers and free staff, medical people and cooking. And so all of those people that aren't really trained how to deal with, hey, these people are going to come and try to manipulate you. So it's dysfunction from the start, and you're just trying to stop the flow. But then the stories that you're reading in the paper or seeing online is that it's about this select few that are doing it. In reality, it's a combination.
Now, I had to film in a prison one time, and they took every piece of equipment apart. They thoroughly went over us. So it just makes me wonder, there's got to be other ways that all that stuff's getting in because it's not through the news crew.
Well, this is the other thing too. When you say news crew, it's like they know that you're coming, and it's like they don't ever want people filming in there. So we're gonna kind of prevent you from doing this. We're gonna say that it's okay. Oh yeah, we want this transparency and openness, but they really don't. At least that's what I saw. I've been out of there since it's been 20 years since I've been out of there. So maybe stuff has changed, but it was just when I was there so negative, and it just dumbs you down where all people are talking about is, what position do you have? And then they're mad at the position that you got because you had weekends off. Or, they're just talking about, the overtime that I got, and it's mindless. And as somebody for me that's trying to come at like I don't know, an artistic mind, that was not there. And that was, I'm writing stuff down because I was writing a book at the time, and they're upset that you're writing stuff down. So everybody's very suspicious about each other and paranoia.
Do you ever try out your comedy routine there? That'd be a good tough audience.
They were actually very mad if you do anything outside of being in there. And also when I was a parole agent, extremely upset. Somebody saw me doing comedy one time and wanted me to be fired for it. Because again, they're not people they're not trying to be artistic people. They're just trying to be law enforcement. And that's the problem a lot with law enforcement. As you see, is people in law enforcement, they can't stop being law enforcement, and they don't see two sides to things. It's just this wall goes up. And I learned that too, doing stand up and improv, is that you have no emotions because you're told constantly to have no emotions. And I really realized after I retired, like how dead inside I was because of that job.
Yeah, we went on a field trip in high school to Tehachapi prison, I think it was. And man, that scared the living daylights out of us. And that's not even a max. That's a pretty low security prison,
No,
I think.
that's a serious prison.
It was scary. And it made
Probably,
us realize, okay, we don't want to end up in here.
yeah, that was a deterrent for me. They probably took you on the minimum yard because every place has got a minimum, like a soft yard and a hard yard. But Tehachapi definitely, to me, it's all concrete and steel. It's like, I would not want to be in a cement box. I'm just surprised that you went on a tour there in high school.
Yeah, it made me realize I wouldn't last 5 seconds in prison. I mean, they would just beat the crap out of me the moment I walked in. So when you're doing your stand up, I've tried that a couple times, and that's tough. I mean, it's tough to get up in front of people. If they're laughing, if they know you and it's going well, it's great. But when there's crickets, when you've made a joke or you're talking about something, all of a sudden you start to sweat and get nervous, and it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's horrifying, which is a large reason I really I did comedy in college, then kind of quit, and I had to quit because my daughter was sick. But I really realized, like, if I could work in a prison, then I can do that. And a lot of it is just embracing the darkness. And if you can stand up, I give credit to any comedian, no matter how good they are or bad they are. But if you can stand up on stage and just embrace that silence, you're going to be fine. And that's what you do. You're going up there. They know for the most part that they came to see comedy. I've only been like heckled once, and that was always a fear of mine. Like I'm going to get heckled or something like that. And really, the guy was just totally drunk. So you as the comedian know you're in control for the most part. You just got to keep yourself in control because all those people, they don't want to be on stage. That's why they came to see you. So a lot of it is just working through all that stuff in your mind. And to me, it's working on myself. It's great therapy, but it definitely scares me to death, and definitely gives me anxiety. And I definitely at the time don't want to be on it, but it is great to actually get your material, to craft your material and get your material up there and say it without forgetting your lines.
What's the biggest place you've ever played?
The biggest place I've ever played is the Ice House in Pasadena.
Uh-huh. And with cancel culture, everything's so PC. There's things that get you in trouble if you're making jokes. I mean, I went to a comedy show in Austin, Texas, and they made everybody lock up their phones in those bags so people couldn't film it. So there's no distortion of what, little clips that take jokes out of context. I mean, it's a little scary what can happen to people if people don't like what you're talking about.
It is scary, but I also think that that's your job as the comedian to adjust your joke. If somebody were to come, there's a comedian that makes a lot of money, and he is making fun of epilepsy and seizures, and I hate that guy, but he gets employed, and nobody says anything about it. So to me, if there's somebody had a problem with what I said and they came up and talked to me, I would change it. And I think that's also with the climate now. If you're going to say, okay, I see your side to it, that's not a problem, because there's jokes that I was doing 15 years ago that I couldn't do now. But that's just your job, is to adapt to what's going on. And I think that every comedian knows that and can do that.
Who's the best stand-up person you've ever seen?
I don't want to be cliche, but it was definitely Bill Burr. And it was, this was before he became famous, but it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning at the Comedy Store, and he was just bombing. And he just he stood up on stage until he turned the entire crowd around. To me, it was just like amazing because I would have walked off stage. I mean, he was like 10 minutes into it where nobody was laughing, anything like that. He was like, I'm just going to stay up here until you guys start laughing. I mean, he really turned everything around, and that was amazing to me.
Yeah, wow. And favorite prison movie?
Off the top of my head, it's the one with Tom Selleck and Innocent Man.
I don't know if I've seen that one, and I love Tom Selleck, so I have to see that. That was good,
Yeah,
good film.
yes, it's because it's definitely exactly how prison is.
All right, so let's bring this back to homes.
Yes.
What would you be your advice to somebody who is buying a home? Whether it's you didn't buy new construction, it sounds like, right? You bought an existing house, or was it new?
No, it was existing house, and I would definitely say when I was going through homes, people were definitely trying to steer me. I had a few real estate agents that were trying to steer me away from the area that I wanted because it was a new construction. And I still like that's burned in my brain. Like I hate that guy because he was trying to get me to a place where I did not want to go to, and I really saw that a lot was those real estate agents were trying to get because they wanted more money or they were going to get some sort of you know other kickback for something for directing to these new places. And I went in thinking, well, I could fix this stuff up, which I can't. I don't have any skills, but I definitely do tell people to go slow and don't, the house across the street from my house was the one that I first wanted, but that got sold. And then the house that I was in got sold, but then they lost their loan. And so I was able to buy this house. And that was just by, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But just by going slow and then also having some sort of savings. I know they'll give you a loan if you don't have any, but because of the fact that you're going through this, it's the biggest deal you're ever going to make in your entire life. And so you need some sort of cushion for when you get punched in the face, because it's definitely going to happen.
And regular maintenance. You have to maintain everything regularly.
Yeah, you're going, those are things that, if a lot of people are like, oh, I'll do the gardening myself. That's a huge ordeal to do. I have a pool, so I have to have a pool guy because I don't know anything. If I tried to do it in the beginning and it just turned the pool green. And those are the conveniences, but they still, cost money to maintain.
Yeah, they do. And like I say, where I live, renting is more expensive almost than owning. There's houses that
Oh
people are
yeah.
renting for $15,000 to $20,000 a month. So if you want to rent a house, you have no chance.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it blows my mind, especially like in Hollywood where people are renting one bedroom apartments $3,200 and um and again, I don't know I don't know what's going on. I don't know what people are doing.
I don't either, but it's definitely a challenge. So how can people get in touch with you, follow you, know where you're performing, just to find out more about you?
Check me out on mikeknox.com or Instagram or TikTok is Mike Knox Comedy.
And are those links on your website also to those
Yes.
social media?
Yes.
Fantastic. And I'll also put those in the show notes so people can get in touch with you and follow you. And so with all this rain, have you had so you had some damage from the rain? It looks like it's died down a little bit today, right? Is it things a little better?
Yeah. So I was having like leaks on the side of my house because of the amount of rain. And so luckily the week before, because it also rained, I had gutters put in for that side. So that seems to have cleared up the leak that I had. I mean, I had that leak for like 10 years probably.
Yeah,
And
you
I
probably
couldn't.
love it when everybody talks about the atmospheric river that's hitting Los Angeles. You guys have had a tough year.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just because they love to build in Los Angeles and not do infrastructure. So especially where I live, there's only, there's two freeways and they keep putting up like 40,000 homes at a time and it's just, stretching all in northern Los Angeles and they're not going to stop. But that's why you're probably seeing videos of all these potholes because it's just like they'll just put one layer thinking it's not going to rain and then it starts to rain and those potholes, start sinking again.
Pretty soon, LA will be going all the way out to Bakersfield.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I used to live there. I mean, that's that whole area. I admire you for sticking with it, but I don't think I could live in California anymore. Just too much traffic, too much smog. Earthquakes scare me more than hurricanes. At least a hurricane, you see it coming. Earthquake, you're just in the middle of the night. Boom.
Yeah, I know. I got really upset a period of time a few years ago, so I started looking at homes in other areas, and I went to Florida and I went to Texas and Arizona, and it was just like, to me, it really is, except for right now with all this rain, the weather is the fact that it's perfect weather most of the time. And then I could navigate. That was the thing, is I knew LA so well that I could navigate for the most part. I mean, there is horrible, horrible traffic, but that's what I loved about COVID, was was no traffic. But when there is traffic, I can at least navigate some sort of way. And that's why I don't want to move. I don't want to start over trying to figure out where these horrible areas are.
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about potholes. I used to live in Detroit, and during the winter, they would have trucks driving around, and they would just throw a handful of asphalt into the potholes as they were driving down the highway. And then it would end up all over everybody's car. It would end up all over the highway. Is that what LA feels like with those potholes?
Oh yeah, because you were thinking, oh, okay, there's potholes, so why don't we try to fix this up? Because there's always, that's the other thing about LA. There's always construction going on, but there doesn't seem to be anybody doing anything, and that clogs up traffic also. And so there's all these potholes, but nobody's doing anything to fix any of them.
And when they do, you see 8 guys standing around a hole and 1 guy working the machine. I want
Oh
that
yeah,
job.
yeah, yes,
I
Caltrans.
think I think I'm qualified for that. All right. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and I hope to see you perform sometime. I'd love to see your act.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you have a story involving your home, good or bad, I'd really like to hear from you. There's a contact form in the show notes. Fill it out, and you might be a guest on an upcoming podcast. And if you enjoyed what you just listened to, I hope you'll become a regular subscriber. A new episode comes out every Tuesday morning. Thanks for listening today. See you next time.